So good morning or good afternoon or good evening wherever you are in the world. Talent Finders would like to welcome journalist, author, and contributor to the New York Times, Alix Strauss. Welcome, Alex.
Thanks for having me. Very excited.
So firstly, I'd like to congratulate you on all your achievements. Can you please share with us how your journey as a journalist and author began?
Sure. It's been a long and wonderful and crazy and awful and extreme journey.
Yes.
Publishing, as you know, the industry has taken quite a hit and is very different than what it was 20 plus years ago when I first entered the arena. I started really in this business writing a play. I thought as an actor, which is what I was doing full time at the time, I thought, well, if I write a play, they have to put you in it. And that made a lot of sense to me. And there weren't a lot of great plays for women except Wendy Wasserstein's Uncommon Women, and that had been done over and over again. And I thought, well, how hard can it be? And it proved it was quite hard, but I was a much, much better writer than I was an actor. And I had been successful as an actor in my early 20s, but this really opened the doors to an entire different kind of artistic endeavor, and one that I really was much better suited for. And then came articles, and then I was working on a novel, and that's really how it started.
Wow, that's amazing. So what inspired you to become a writer, and who would you say are your biggest inspirations and why?
That's a great question. Well, I was never a great reader as a kid. I think I really disliked being forced to read, and I think I felt that way very often in class. And I don't think there were great books. We read Beowulf and we read Siddhartha and things that I would never read on my own. And it wasn't until I got to college and a friend introduced me to Bret Easton Ellis's Less Than Zero. And that is really where I fell in love with this kind of pop culture, name-dropping commercial fiction that was edgy and dark and unattractive, but really interesting to read. And that was followed by Jay McInerney, Tama Janowitz, Katherine Harrison, Carrie Fisher, and I really understood this kind of writing, and I thought, you know what, I think I can do this. And
Yeah.
that's really how my publishing in terms of fiction and nonfiction took off. In terms of writing articles, I loved Dominic Dunn, and I loved sort of these edgy pop culture, underground situations that covered Manhattan. And I always wanted it to sort of do that as well. And then I became a trend writer. And then I found a home really in pop culture and human behavior. And I think I'm very left of center. I think I really will see a story very differently than somebody else might. And I don't always want to write the exact story. I hate chick lit. I'm just not a chick lit writer, and I'm not a chick reader, and apologies for anybody that is, which is okay, but I am interested in the unattractive. I think the unattractive, if done correctly, can be very attractive.
Yeah. Well, there's beauty in imperfection, right?
Yes, truly.
So growing up, what were the factors that you believe influenced you?
I really didn't know a lot of writers. I have to say I really did this in some sense on my own. I think you really just delve into something that if you're passionate, that's really it. You have to be passionate, and you have to be resourceful, and you just develop. I did a lot of on-the-job training. You learn to find the story. You learn to understand what a good quote is. I didn't go to school for this. I went to school for theater, and then I got a degree in education, and I really just I stayed with something that really at a time when a lot of people told me I should really do anything else in my life but be a writer.
Yeah. But isn't that always the case, right?
You know what? I think it depends. I think there are people who go into family businesses. I think there are people who really do enjoy a very structured 9-to-5 job. That was not me. I knew that at 12 when I did my first commercial, and I thought, wow, I'm never going to have that really structured life.
Yeah.
And then you find ways to sort of add structure, because ironically, I'm an extremely structured person, but I structure my life around something that has no structure. And I guess that's part of, you have to be very disciplined. You really have to, you have to be ready to do the work. It's not an easy job, but it's an extraordinary one.
Yeah, because every day is different, right?
Every day is different. Every story is different. Every person you interview is different. Every direction you want to take the story is different. So as much as there's a step and repeat in people's lives, the way you go about telling that story and the different ways you go about finding that story are always different, as is every day. Every day for me is different.
Yeah, absolutely. So in a highly competitive industry, when did your big break come, and what would you say differentiates you and your writing style from others in your industry?
Well, the big break, I don't know if it was a big break per se. My first piece for the Times was really monumental for me. That was in '99, and it was a piece in the live section when there was a live section. And it was a personal essay. And that really was, like, you had made it if you got into that. That was really one of those goals everybody who wanted to be a writer had. And it was once a week. It was on a Sunday, and it was such a special section. And that was about why I love funerals. And which I do. And it really stemmed from being an only child, in that I didn't really get to see or meet a lot of family members. And you really only, in my family, you really got to meet the family members when there was one less family member, of course. And because everybody's invited to a funeral, and I loved how people interacted, and I loved that all bets were off, and you could, be any emotion that you wanted. And I loved finding out who these people were that I was supposedly connected to. So that happened in '99, and then in December of '99 also, I had several pieces in one issue of Marie Claire, and I had left to write. I was hired to write a quickie book, what was called a quickie book, which was on a celebrity, on a teen celebrity, and at the time it was Britney Spears, which is kind of crazy. And that all happened in December of '99. So I would have to say that was a really crucial and important month/year for me, and that I realized I'm absolutely in this groove of making it work.
So what would you say some of your favorite assignments as a journalist have been?
There have been so many, and they're all your children for different reasons too, that you love them. I really do love the ones that start the conversation, that asks somebody to look at someone's life where you don't have to agree with it, and you don't even have to like it. But you do have to start that conversation and try to almost understand it or look at it differently. So I think the Times has been so thoughtful in allowing me to have this column called It's No Secret. And we did a piece recently on a gay couple who live separately. The subjects for It's No Secret really talk about marriage and what each person has learned about themselves and each other and marriage along the way. And this couple lived in separate homes in New York, and that is part of how they really structured their marriage. And again, you don't have to agree with it, but it did start a very interesting conversation about what is a marriage, what is a family, how do you keep your family and marriage together, and what works for you may not work for someone else. So I really love that, and they were very thoughtful and very open, and it just was a great pop culture slice of life. There was a piece we did on two transgender who got married, and that was really significant. So he was a she and she was biologically born a he. And in this crazy world of ours, they found each other, fell in love, and it also, you know, makes for that amazing piece that love is love. And while until that's taken away from us, everyone can marry anyone, and that will hold up in court. And somebody in you know, a less urban or you know, somewhere in Idaho or Omaha, who are told they can't be what they want to be, that piece, hopefully they will find comfort and inspiration from. And you know, I think those pieces are very important. They make tremendous statements. And we just did a party that we covered, a sort of this pop culture piece on. The party was it was almost an all-night experience, and how they take a black space and fill it at 6 a.m. and then they're gone in 24 hours, and it's almost like the event never happened. So that was really interesting to see that come together.
Amazing.
Yeah, it really was. And then there's been some celebrities. I mean, I had the opportunity to interview Betty Friedan and Carrie Fisher and Dominic Dunn and a lot of celebrities who have passed on, and that was quite extraordinary.
Yeah, no, that's amazing. So, starting out as a journalist, was it an organic process to becoming an author, and did this help you, or did it kind of just happen concurrently at the same time?
I think they happened together. I was definitely working on some articles while I was working on my first novel, and they really did happen together. I didn't set out to write, and I didn't wake up one day and say, I think I'm going to start a novel, but that's really what happened. And, you know, it's just a different kind of writing. It's all the same creative process, but it's just a different one, certainly a much longer endeavor. But I think for fiction, I didn't need to do the research for the novel that I was working on. I mean, there are lots of authors who do an enormous amount of writing and researching before they actually do the novel, but this didn't require it. And I think while I was working on a lot of nonfiction article pieces, it was nice to have this creative process where I could make the characters do whatever they needed to do. Whereas obviously can't do that with nonfiction or journalism.
Amazing. So you have a very impressive track record, writing for some of the biggest publications like Oprah Magazine, Condé Nast Traveler, and the Financial Times, amongst others. Can you share with us how this came about?
Well, it does have to do with being resourceful and not taking no. And, you know, I didn't just wake up and say, I'm going to write for the Times and here's the first piece. At the time, you know, for every accepted yes I got, or article that was okayed, I'm sure there was something like 10 to 15 rejections or more. So you have to find, in one sense, you do start really with what you know. I think my first couple of articles were for a newspaper that covered actors and the creative life. So I think it was for Backstage and other publications. And that was what I knew. I mean, I really do think there is something about writing what you know. And then it's a process. You don't just build a wedding cake. You don't just make a wedding cake. You start, and I'm not a great baker, but you start with the cookies that you slice and you can stick in the oven, and then you go to the ones where you can make the cookies and hopefully they taste good. And then you go to brownies, or, you know, for me, I started Rice Krispie treats, and you make your way to building a wedding cake. It absolutely takes time. So you have to stick with it. There are people who get very lucky and they're good writers, and their writing is at the right time, and they can fall easily or slip it easily into this crazy business. And then I think there are people who it just takes time. We have the ability now, because of the internet, which was not around when I started. We really have a blog, or I don't know if people have blogs anymore, but through Instagram or Insta-Live, that I like to call it, and all of the other creative channels that they can be, you know, make their own make their own opportunities,
Yes.
there's much greater opportunity for that right now. And that didn't exist. So I think in some case, as long as it goes back to being passionate and being honest about the work and not being afraid to have a voice.
Yeah, exactly. So what made you create a column or create your column, It's No Secret, and why did you choose the complex topic of marriage and relationships?
I think that people are fascinated. Not everyone is fascinated by funerals as I am, but everyone for some reason is fascinated by weddings. You never, if you snort cocaine off of an Elvis impersonator's stomach, as long as it happened at a wedding, people are happy to talk about it.
Yeah.
There is something very interesting about our wanting to not only hear about relationships, but to be in them. And I think it's very universal. And so, we never run out of, look, we never run out of subject matters. We never run out of, whenever someone is engaged, the first thing people say is, how did he propose? Or how did she propose?
Yeah.
And let me see the ring. So I think these are stories that people are interested in hearing. I think everybody's life is different.
Yes.
I think everybody has a story to tell. And
yes.
I was really interested in being that person who helped share those stories.
That's amazing. And it's really the power of storytelling, because it also helps for other people to relate or, inspire people. So definitely. So you're an award-winning author. Did this open other doors in your career? And if so, can you give us an example?
I would have to say it did not. I mean, it's nice to get the awards.
Yes.
Who doesn't like an award? But it wasn't like, I got an award. The awards are really lovely. And it's wonderful to be recognized for your work and to be thought of well. And it's really very nice. But it depends on what kind of award it was, but it's lovely to be recognized for your fiction. It's not easy to get fiction published these days, and it's certainly the awards are few. But at the end of the day, too, if nobody knows you got the award, I don't think it matters as much. It's not like the Tonys, where I think, or the Academy Awards, but I think it should be. I think we should absolutely put more emphasis on National Book Awards and pushcart awards and short story awards. And I think we should all get, we should all get ponies for just waking up in the morning these days and
yes.
It's very difficult. And I can't say that the awards were great. And yes, it looks terrific. But it also looks terrific to say you graduated from Harvard or Yale, but I don't know if that really makes a difference anymore. It's nice. Who doesn't want to graduate from Harvard or Yale?
Yeah.
That doesn't mean it makes you successful or happy or confident. I'm sure that there are a lot of people who graduated from a number of places that they were told they'd have these auspicious careers in life and are miserable.
Yes, exactly. So can you share with the listeners about your various book titles and which one did you enjoy writing the most?
Well, I'm probably one of the few people who really do vacillate between fiction and nonfiction. I find them both really interesting, and I love fiction for different reasons, and I love nonfiction. I think nonfiction is also much easier to get published, and you can really write a good nonfiction book in a amount of time, in a year or two. At least I can. I happen to be a fast writer.
Yeah.
Whereas a novel, I think, really does take years to sit with and to understand your characters and to finish. And for me, I'm sort of writing the novels while I'm working on other things. Whereas nonfiction, generally, you're on a contract and you're given a certain amount of time, and it's a very different process.
Yeah.
I think my first, I love my first novel, The Joy of Funerals, because it was it was very, very special. I mean, they are children. You love all your children, but The Joy of Funerals was just it was so organic, and it was so interesting to me to write, and not everybody understood it at the time. And it's a collection of short stories that are all interwoven together and linked through the main character. And it was a different device, and I don't know if people understood it at the time, and we're much more open to understanding these devices now as the industry has changed and as people have changed, and certainly as Netflix and Amazon Prime and have opened up the doors for different modalities and different ways of telling a story. I think people are looking, there's that trickle-down effect that literature or fiction has the ability to sort of mold and mesh with that. And for nonfiction, I love pop culture. So working on books like Death Becomes Them, Unearthing the Suicides of the Brilliant, the Famous, and the Notorious was really interesting to me because no one had done it. No one had taken 30 of the most influential suicides and looked at the correlations between all of them and why people kill themselves or why they take their own lives, and really taking a look at mental illness and addiction and these brilliant luminaries and understanding taking a tremendous overview of suicide and how this all came together and why we don't discuss it. And there was this white space. So that was really interesting to me. And, based upon availability was my follow-up novel to The Joy of Funerals. And I was very interested in, it takes place in the Four Seasons Hotel and really asks the question, who lives in your room before you and who inhabits after? And can you just be erased, or do you leave? Is your presence sort of still there, lingering like a ghost? And that was really interesting as well. So
and it also makes you think. I've also had those kind of moments where you think, it's like you said, like who inhabited that house or that room or that place before. And obviously, like you said, absolutely long gone. So it's very interesting to think.
And I appreciate you saying that because they're interesting concepts. I think that, again, they're not the most attractive, but they are relatable characters. And I think that's, how many people do we know are truly attractive? And I don't mean that in a visual sense per se. I mean that in all of the internal and the external and the things we don't want to show the world and what we end up showing the world and the real meaty stories that we tell.
Yeah, absolutely. So what would you say some of your biggest career highlights have been?
Well, having your first novel published, for me at least, was extraordinary. I mean, that's just an incredible moment, especially when you're really told, you should choose another career, that it's very difficult. Maybe you're not a great writer. And I had a lot of people didn't get it. And they, when you're a trend journalist and you're a little ahead of the world and a little left of center, it's not the easiest place to be.
No.
But, it's very difficult to make yourself less of who you are. And I've been fortunate enough that, the world did catch up with me a little bit, but it's not easy either. And you really have to stick with telling the stories you want to tell. It's really important to be authentic and to stay passionate and have drive and be honest. And so having Joy of Funerals published was an unbelievable moment, and it's so tangible. A book today, as much as we're involved with the digital platforms, it's nothing next to something that's so tangible, like a newspaper, like a magazine, like a book. No matter what happens, if all the computers explode, God forbid, but if they do, and we can't jump on our phones, this is there forever,
Yes, of course.
Being in the Times has been unbelievably amazing. And that first piece, that Lives piece, was really also monumental for me. That was, they're stepping stones, and they're so specific. I can literally, if I had to go on a game show or something and someone said, what are the 5 most important pieces? I could do that, because again, there's this tangibility. And I think having the opportunity people have been very wonderful about sharing their stories with me. And I think every time someone shares one and lets me into their lives, that's a gift as well.
Absolutely. Because it's just a very personal thing. That's the thing.
You're right. But I love the personal. I love the connection. I don't think we connect enough.
No, definitely not. I think that's also the reason why we have so many mental health issues too, because there's a real detachment, because like you said, we've got the whole digital thing, and it does have its purpose and it does do great things, but then on the other side, it's impacting people on a social level because there's less interaction.
It's going to be horrific. The downfall from this will be catastrophic. It really will. I think we have lost the ability to connect on a very human, very organic level.
Yeah.
We have become enamored with the lies that we see on Instagram or Insta-lie, and that none of it's really real.
Yeah.
And I think we are so lost, and I think we're all very lonely, and we haven't really dealt with it, aside from the fact that we're increasing the addiction parts of our brain, whether it's with technology, whether it's with the phone specifically, and the checking of who's doing what, and what was and what moment am I going to capture to show the world that I'm out and having a good time when really I'm miserable. And it's all a lie. It's all a lie. And we've also learned that certain things are acceptable. Bad behavior has become almost the new standard, and that's not okay. And and the kids today, they don't interact, and it's just a mess. They don't know how to be resourceful. We haven't taught them how to have independent play and how to cope with things and where their coping mechanisms are. And it's just going to be, it's a shit show. I hope I can say that.
Of course. And also I think to your point as well, because I was having this discussion with somebody earlier, is that there's a whole element of instant gratification. Like, people don't want to work for things anymore. Like, everybody just wants to make a quick buck, or they think that, making a lot of money is, an instantaneous thing. They don't understand the journey, even as entrepreneurs. So I think there's a very false sense of perception. So you're 100% right.
And it's very scary. I don't think people realize how removed we are from each other.
Yeah.
I mean, people wait for the better offers, and cancellations are just accepted, and that's the norm now. And, there's really very little we can count on. And where's the stability in people and our relationships and our friendships and in everything? And, as much as we've opened the floodgates to so many different lifestyles, there's also some responsibility we have to take for that.
Absolutely.
And that's, I don't think we've lost an accountability, which is very, very frightening. And I now I sound like this awful, naysayer, but I'm very concerned at what the fallout will be.
Yeah. I think there are a lot of people that are, and it's like, well, even when it comes back down to leadership, I mean, there's no real leadership anymore. Nobody's really taking the wheel. So I think that's also, it's just created a massive state of confusion.
I think we are really in a lot of trouble, and it will take us a very long time to get out of it. We will, because that's what we do, and we are We are all survivors, New York is especially.
Yes,
But
and resilient.
we are so resilient.
Yeah.
But it will have done damage, and we are more traumatized than we realize.
Absolutely. So what would your advice be to other young and up-and-coming writers who are starting out?
Don't take no for an answer. If someone says no, it's an opportunity for someone else to say yes.
Yeah.
I think the younger generation is really, I'm not sure I think they hear no and they think that no means no across the board. And
Yeah.
In the same sense, they're amazing at creating, different venues for themselves that I don't think my generation created or understood. So, they're very savvy, but within that savviness, there also has to be an understanding for accountability and for stepping up. But I think that you have to go, passion is not, it shouldn't be underrated. And
No.
Don't be afraid to tell your story, and don't be afraid to reach out to the people who can hear it, need to hear it, want to hear it, don't want to hear it. You really do need to be scrappy. There's nothing wrong with being attractively scrappy.
Yes, absolutely.
And you have to make your own opportunities.
Yeah, for sure. Because no one's going to hand you anything on a silver platter. I mean, especially in, cities like New York, it's very competitive, and you really have to fight for for what you want. So.
But I think it's all obtainable. I think you really, if more so now than ever,
yes,
you really can create something that's yours. There's so many opportunities to have control over what you want to create and how you want to create it. That really was non-existent during my 20s and 30s.
Absolutely. So what is your advice to those who are pitching potential stories to a journalist or an editor when trying to get a piece published?
There's an interesting thing that they teach you in improv class, which is called the yes and it continues the scene. The whole idea of the yes and is so that the scene continues. And I think people don't realize that that's some sense a great business tool as well. And when an editor says, I don't like this, but this idea might work, the answer really, especially when you're starting out, is to say yes, and I can give you that as well.
Yes.
So the opportunity may not always present itself as exactly what you wanted, but you can't always have that. And sometimes it's important just to build the relationship. And those relationships are forever. How you present yourself, how you handle certain situations really matter. And I think that's really important. And if you say you're going to hand it in on a certain date, you have got to hand it in on that date, if not before.
Yes, of course, because deadlines are critical too.
Right.
So what are some of your biggest challenges and obstacles, or what have they been in your career, thus far, and how do you overcome these, or how did you overcome these?
I think that, again, being a little ahead of the world, or seeing it differently, or being a trend journalist and having this idea or ideas for certain novels or creative endeavors or whatever you want to call them before not everybody understood what I was working on or writing or the way I saw something. And that can be extremely frustrating, but it is one of those things where you have to say they didn't get it. It doesn't mean that I did it incorrectly. It doesn't mean that it's bad. It means that it wasn't understood.
Yes.
And I think people don't hear the difference in that. And I
No.
think if I listen to everybody's no, I mean, I can't, my second novel got rejected a bunch of times until someone said yes. And HarperCollins said yes. And they're a great publishing firm or great publishing company. And that's really all you needed. All I needed was the one yes. It didn't matter that other people or that other publishing companies said no.
Yeah.
So just because one person says no, that is not the final word.
No, exactly. And it's not always a personal thing either. And I think that's what people also have to learn.
I think, yeah, that's absolutely true as well. That you don't know, all you have is a fact. The fact is they said no. You don't have the story as to why they said no. And sometimes when you get this rejection note that says, oh, we really love the writing, or the writing was strong, but we didn't understand this, or this doesn't fit within our genre, or we're not sure what to do with this.
Yes.
You don't know that, or I fell in love with this, but my team didn't understand it. It doesn't mean that that's the full story either. And that person who wanted to rally for you may not have been able to rally everything. Everything is a compromise. And maybe they're rallying for something else in the moment, and, they just couldn't rally for everything all at once.
Yeah.
You just never know. You really don't know.
Exactly. So the approach to writing in terms of quality and standard in the younger generation has vastly changed over the years. Has this impacted the industry in a positive or a negative way? And can you elaborate from your perspective?
Well, certainly there's the facts, and then there's, alternative facts or fake facts, which are not facts at all. So, I mean, you either tell the story with honesty and integrity, or you don't.
Yeah.
And if you're going to tell it with creativity and creative, unrealistic facts, that's called fiction, and you should change careers and not do nonfiction and become a fiction writer. I think people don't realize how important it is to tell an accurate story. Yeah. And we've lost that. In the same sense, because of where we are and what's available in terms of telling your story, that's changed dramatically. And the younger generation has the ability to tell their story in any way and any form they want.
Yes.
But if you are telling your story in an unauthentic way that's filled with things that didn't happen, and you're trying to pass that off as truth, especially for a publication or in a publication, you cannot do that. That line is pretty specific. It is very black and white. That's why there are all these different areas. That's why you can write fiction. That's why you can write autobiographical fiction. You can write creative nonfiction, but you cannot blur the lines between journalistic integrity and the other.
Yes.
And we've become very good at doing that, and that's a problem.
Yes.
And
nobody really knows what the truth is anymore these days, especially when you're dealing with real life situations.
Yeah, our standards have to be higher. Our level of what we'll accept has to be higher. And I think we've lost a lot of great publications because of a number of reasons, whether it's because digital has become so effortless and so abundant, whether we've made the right decisions or not on that, I can't say, but we have lost a lot of great publications, and I do believe in print. I will forever always believe in print. Yeah. So I'm not saying I'm still holding on to a rotary phone, but I do. I am pretty old school, and I do believe in print. I still carry around an actual tangible date book, or calendar.
Yeah.
So I'm in the, I'm definitely in a small group
Yeah, but I think with a combination of old school and, you know, new technologies and balancing those things, I think it's still a good thing. You know, I was saying to somebody actually earlier today as well, you know, if you look at, you know, people like Warren Buffett, I mean, you know, he's a massive, you know, success still. And I still believe there's something to be said for old school learning and for old school principles, because for a lot of those people, it still works.
I agree, everything in moderation. You know, you
Yeah.
can't turn yourself off either
No.
from, I'm not telling anybody to throw out their iPhones.
No.
And I think the iPhone is an amazing device, but you can also just live in an Instagram world.
No. It's very deceiving.
It is very deceiving.
Yeah.
And it's, you know, it is very deceiving, and that's unfortunate too.
Yeah. So that leads me to the next, or the final question. What are the 3 key pieces of advice you would give to others in your industry, and what legacy would you like to leave?
Oh my God, that is a boatload of a question. Questions. Well, the advice I guess goes back to some of our earlier conversation about, you know, it's important to be passionate, and it is important to be resourceful, and it's really important to believe in yourself.
Yeah.
And in terms of a legacy, I'm very proud of the work that I've done. I'm proud of the people that I've worked with. I'm proud to have been part of the places that I've contributed to. And in many ways of what we spoke about earlier too, they could put all the articles and all my books in the coffin with me. So,
Yeah.
you know, you can't put the internet in the coffin with you. You just,
No.
it doesn't work. I mean, I'm sure there are a couple of iPhones you can throw in there and maybe my laptop, but I think so much of what, I'm probably one of the few people, unlike a doctor, that can at least, you know, once you stitch someone's, you know, heart, or you put their heart back inside and stitch them closed, or you give them a new set of lungs, or you replace a kidney, or you take out a tumor, you know, you're not going to hold on to some of those things as much as you can a book. And that's not to say they don't have a tremendous legacy. It's just, so I think in terms of a legacy, if the internet continues, and the internet will always be there. I mean, it is an extraordinary tool. I will have made a thumbprint somewhere, whether you like my work or not, and that's okay. But I will, if you search my name, shit will come up, you know, and I'm proud of 98% of it.
Yeah. Well, that's amazing. Well, thank you so much, Alex, for your time and for sharing your story, and hopefully we can have you back in the future and see where your journey continues.
Thank you so much for asking, and thank you for your great questions and for being kind enough to want to hear the stories and what I had to say. And thank you for being a great conversationalist too. I really appreciate it, and I'm so glad that we've connected this year.
Yes, me too. Thank you so much.